Marcus Chin stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, watching the city sprawl beneath him like a circuit board. At 34, he commanded one of the fastest-growing tech companies on the West Coast. But the view that once filled him with pride now felt as cold as the glass against his palm. 3 years had passed since the betrayal that shattered not just his heart, but his faith in human nature itself. The betrayal hadn't come from a business rival or a corporate enemy. It had come from Sarah, the woman he'd planned to marry, and David, his best friend since college and business partner. The memory still burned like acid in his chest. He'd returned early from a business trip to surprise Sarah with an engagement ring, only to find them together in their shared apartment. The ring had cost more than most people's cars, but it wasn't the money that hurt. It was the laughter he'd heard through the door, the intimate jokes, the realization that their relationship had been going on for months while he'd been building their future. Marcus pulled his hand away from the window, leaving a brief fog mark that quickly disappeared. Just like everything else, he thought bitterly. Nothing lasted. Nothing could be trusted. Mr. Chun. His assistant's voice came through the intercom, pulling him back to the present. The board meeting is in 10 minutes. I'll be right there, Jennifer. Marcus straightened his tie and grabbed his tablet. The quarterly reports showed another record-breaking performance, but success felt hollow when you had no one to share it with. He'd built walls around himself so high that even his victories felt distant. The boardroom buzzed with quiet conversation as Marcus entered. 12 faces turned toward him, a mix of investors and advisors who saw him as a golden boy, a tech prodigy who could do no wrong. If only they knew how empty it all felt. Ladies and gentlemen, let's begin. Marcus activated the presentation screen with a gesture. Our third quarter numbers exceeded projections by 18%. The presentation flowed automatically. He'd given versions of this speech dozens of times. Revenue up, user base expanding, new contracts signed. The company, TechFlow Solutions, had started as a small software development firm but had grown into a major player in business automation. Every success should have felt like a victory, but Marcus experienced it all through a layer of emotional numbness. The expansion into the European market is ahead of schedule, he continued, clicking to the next slide. Our Dublin office is already generating significant returns. Board member Patricia Williams raised her hand. Marcus, this is impressive work. But I have to ask, when was the last time you took a vacation? You look exhausted. Marcus forced a smile. I appreciate the concern, Patricia, but I'm fine. Work keeps me focused. Work was all he had left. After Sarah and David's betrayal, Marcus had thrown himself into the company with an intensity that worried even his most ambitious colleagues. 18-hour days became normal. Sleeping in the office wasn't unusual. He'd fired David immediately, of course, buying out his shares and cutting all ties. Sarah had tried to explain, had sent letters and emails that Marcus deleted without reading. Some wounds were too deep to heal. The meeting concluded with handshakes and congratulations. Marcus nodded politely, but felt nothing. Success, without someone to share it with, was just a number on a screen. Back in his office, Marcus stared at the stack of invitations on his desk. Gallery openings, charity galas, industry conferences. He used to attend these events with Sarah, enjoying the networking and social aspects. Now they felt like torture chambers filled with couples and small talk. He swept the invitations into his drawer without opening them. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister Lisa. Dinner this weekend? You've been avoiding the family for months. Marcus typed back, busy with the European expansion. Rain check. Lisa's response came immediately. That's what you said last month. And the month before. Mom's worried about you. He set the phone down without responding. His family meant well, but they didn't understand. They still believed in love and trust, in the fairy tale that good people deserved happy endings. Marcus had learned better. In business, at least, betrayal was expected. Contracts protected you. Legal documents spelled out exactly what everyone owed to whom. Personal relationships were messier, more dangerous. The sun was setting by the time Marcus finally left the office. The parking garage echoed with his footsteps as he walked to his BMW. He'd upgraded from the modest Honda he'd driven during the startup days. But luxury felt meaningless when experienced alone. The car's leather seats and high-end sound system couldn't fill the silence. His penthouse apartment reflected his current mindset: expensive, elegant, and completely sterile. The interior designer had called it sophisticated minimalism. Marcus called it empty. The few personal touches from his relationship with Sarah were long gone, replaced by generic art and furniture that looked like a hotel suite. Marcus poured himself a glass of wine and sat on the balcony overlooking the city. The lights twinkled like stars, each one representing someone's life, someone's dreams. He wondered how many of those people trusted each other, how many would end up disappointed. Probably most of them. His laptop sat open on the dining table, displaying quarterly projections that needed review. Work never ended, which was exactly how Marcus preferred it. Numbers didn't lie or cheat. Code executed exactly as written. Profit margins were honest in a way people never seemed to be. The next morning brought another day of meetings and decisions. Marcus had learned to function on autopilot, his business instincts sharp even when his emotional life remained frozen. TechFlow had 3 major client presentations scheduled, including one with a potential Fortune 500 account that could triple their revenue stream. The Morrison Industries meeting is at 2. Jennifer reminded him as she brought in his coffee. They're very interested in our supply chain management software. Marcus nodded absently, reviewing the presentation materials. Morrison Industries was exactly the kind of client TechFlow needed: established, profitable, and looking for long-term partnerships. The kind of business relationship that made sense because everything was clearly defined in contracts. At lunch, Marcus ate alone at his desk, scrolling through industry news on his tablet. A headline caught his attention: Local entrepreneur wins humanitarian award. The article featured a woman named Elena Rodriguez who had built a nonprofit organization that provided technology training to underemployed workers. Her photo showed someone about his age with warm brown eyes and a genuine smile that seemed to leap off the screen. Marcus found himself reading the entire article, something he rarely did with feel-good news stories. Elena had started her program with just $5,000 and had grown it to serve over 2,000 people annually. The article mentioned how she personally taught many of the classes, working with everyone from single mothers to former inmates trying to rebuild their lives. She sees potential where others see problems. One of her students was quoted as saying, "Elena doesn't give up on people, even when they've given up on themselves." Marcus closed the tablet with more force than necessary. Stories like that irritated him now. They painted the world as a place where good intentions mattered, where people could be trusted to do the right thing. Real life was messier and more disappointing. The Morrison Industries meeting went perfectly. Marcus presented TechFlow's capabilities with polished precision, answered technical questions with expertise, and negotiated terms with skill honed by years of business dealings. The Morrison executives were impressed, and preliminary contracts would be drawn up within the week. "Excellent work," said James Morrison, the company's CEO. "You've built something impressive here, Marcus. Your team must be very proud to work for someone with your vision." Marcus accepted the compliment professionally, but it felt hollow. His employees were well-paid and productive, but he deliberately kept relationships strictly professional since the David situation. Trust was a luxury he could no longer afford. That evening, Marcus worked late again, reviewing legal documents for the Morrison deal. The office cleaning crew moved quietly through the building, and he was likely the only executive still at his desk. This had become his routine. Work until exhaustion forced him to go home, sleep for a few hours, then return to the safety of schedules and spreadsheets. His phone rang, displaying his mother's number. Marcus hesitated, then answered. "Hi, Mom." "Marcus, sweetheart, I haven't heard from you in weeks. How are you doing?" "I'm fine. Just busy with work. We landed a major new client today." "That's wonderful, dear. But I wasn't asking about work. How are you doing?" Marcus rubbed his temples. His mother had an uncanny ability to see through his deflections. "I'm fine, Mom. Really. You know, Mrs. Patterson from down the street has a lovely daughter who just moved back from New York. She's a teacher, very sweet girl. I thought maybe dash. Mom, please. I'm not interested in meeting anyone right now. Marcus, it's been 3 years since Sarah. You can't shut yourself off from the world forever." "I'm not shut off from anything. I have a company to run." The silence stretched between them before his mother spoke again, her voice gentle but firm. Success means nothing if you have no one to share it with, sweetheart. Your father and I are worried about you. After promising to call more often, Marcus hung up and returned to his documents. But his mother's words echoed in his mind. Success means nothing if you have no one to share it with. He'd heard variations of that sentiment many times, but they always felt like platitudes from people who'd never experienced real betrayal. The cleaning crew had finished and left, leaving Marcus alone in the silent building. Through his office windows, he could see other office buildings where a few late workers still had their lights on. He wondered if they were running from something too, or if they simply loved their work more than he did. Marcus finally packed up his briefcase around midnight, exhaustion weighing on his shoulders like a heavy coat. The drive home was automatic, muscle memory navigating the empty streets while his mind wandered. Tomorrow would bring more meetings, more decisions, more opportunities to prove his business acumen while avoiding anything that required emotional investment. The penthouse felt even emptier than usual as he entered, his footsteps echoing in the spacious rooms. Marcus loosened his tie and poured another glass of wine, standing at the window overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, Elena Rodriguez was probably planning ways to help more people, believing in the goodness of others with an optimism that Marcus had lost years ago. He'd read once that successful people often suffered from what psychologists called hedonic adaptation, the tendency for achievements to lose their emotional impact over time. But Marcus suspected his numbness ran deeper than that. It wasn't just that success felt normal, it was that nothing felt like anything at all. The wine tasted expensive, but brought no pleasure. The view was spectacular, but stirred no emotion. Even his anger at Sarah and David had faded into a dull ache, like an old injury that only hurt when the weather changed. Marcus set down the wine glass and headed to his bedroom, another space that looked more like a hotel room than a home. The king-sized bed felt vast and cold, sheets that cost more than most people's weekly salary but provided no comfort beyond their thread count. Sleep came fitfully, filled with dreams of empty boardrooms and contracts that dissolved when he tried to read them. In one particularly vivid dream, he was giving a presentation to an audience of mannequins, their plastic faces reflecting his words back at him without understanding or emotion. The crack in Marcus's armor widened unexpectedly on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. He was reviewing quarterly budgets when Jennifer knocked on his door with an unusual expression, part excitement, part concern. "Mr. Chun, there's a situation that requires your attention. The Morrison Industries deal has hit a snag." Marcus looked up sharply. The Morrison contract was supposed to be signed next week, representing the largest single deal in TechFlow's history. What kind of snag? They want to add a community impact component to the contract. Something about corporate social responsibility. Their board apparently requires all major vendors to demonstrate community engagement. Marcus frowned. Corporate social responsibility was the kind of feel-good requirement that complicated straightforward business deals. What exactly are they asking for? They want us to partner with a local nonprofit for at least 6 months, providing either funding or services. They've suggested a few organizations, but they're particularly interested in something called the Bridge Foundation. The name meant nothing to Marcus, but the requirement irritated him. Business deals should be about competence and value, not charity work that made executives feel better about their bonuses. Still, the Morrison contract was worth nearly $50 million over 3 years. Whatever hoops they wanted him to jump through would be worth it. Set up meetings with their suggested nonprofits. Let's get this handled quickly so we can move forward. Jennifer hesitated. There's something else. James Morrison specifically mentioned that his daughter volunteers with the Bridge Foundation. She apparently recommended it very highly. Great, Marcus thought. Family politics wrapped in corporate responsibility. The wealthy loved their pet charities, especially when they could leverage business deals to support them. But $50 million bought a lot of patience for awkward social requirements. The first nonprofit meeting was exactly what Marcus expected. An earnest director who spent 45 minutes explaining their mission to provide job training for homeless veterans, followed by a presentation full of heartwarming stories and budget projections. Marcus wrote a check for $50,000, shook hands professionally, and scheduled the minimum required follow-up meetings. The second organization, focused on youth mentorship, followed the same pattern. well-intentioned people doing good work, but nothing that connected with Marcus on any meaningful level. He could write checks and attend a few photo opportunities. The Morrison contract would be worth the inconvenience. The Bridge Foundation meeting was scheduled for Thursday afternoon at their offices in a converted warehouse downtown. Marcus arrived expecting another routine charity presentation, but the building itself surprised him. Instead of the typical nonprofit aesthetic of motivational posters and donated furniture, the Bridge Foundation looked like a tech startup. Modern computers filled multiple training rooms, 3D printers hummed in a maker space, and professional-grade recording equipment occupied what looked like a media production studio. A receptionist directed him to a conference room where he waited, reviewing emails on his phone. Through the glass walls, he could see classrooms where people of various ages worked intently at computers, some following along with instructors, others collaborating on projects that looked surprisingly sophisticated. Mr. Chen, I'm Elena Rodriguez, Executive Director of the Bridge Foundation. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us. Marcus looked up and froze. The woman from the newspaper article stood in the doorway, but seeing her in person was completely different from viewing her photograph. Elena Rodriguez was petite, but carried herself with quiet confidence. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore jeans and a Bridge Foundation t-shirt instead of typical nonprofit business attire. But it was her eyes that caught him off guard. The same warm brown from her photo, but alive with an intelligence and energy that made the room feel brighter. Ms. Rodriguez. Marcus stood and extended his hand, noting that her handshake was firm and direct. I read about your organization in the paper recently. Oh, the humanitarian award thing. Elena smiled, and Marcus realized he'd never seen a completely unguarded smile before. Sarah's smiles had always calculated their effect, and business smiles were tools for influence. Elena's smile was simply genuine pleasure. That was embarrassing but helpful for fundraising. Please, sit down. Can I get you coffee? We have excellent coffee here because I'm completely addicted to caffeine. Marcus found himself almost smiling in return. Coffee would be great. Elena returned with 2 mugs that looked handmade, steam rising from coffee that smelled significantly better than the expensive machine in his office. One of our students is a former barista who teaches a customer service class. He insisted we needed proper coffee equipment to maintain his professional standards. You have students teaching classes? Absolutely. It's one of our core principles. Everyone has something to offer, regardless of their current circumstances. Miguel, the barista, came to us 2 years ago after losing his apartment and his job on the same week. Now he manages our customer service training program and has his own place again. He says teaching keeps him connected to his skills while building new ones. Marcus sipped the coffee, which was indeed excellent. Tell me about the Bridge Foundation. Elena's presentation was unlike anything he'd experienced in the nonprofit world. Instead of emotional appeals or guilt-inducing statistics, she talked about practical problems and innovative solutions. The Bridge Foundation didn't just provide job training. They created pathways for people to build sustainable careers in growing fields. Traditional job training programs often prepare people for jobs that barely pay living wages, Elena explained, pulling up data on her laptop. We focus on technology, media production, small business development, fields where someone can actually build a future, not just get by. She showed him student projects, a former construction worker who'd learned video editing and now ran a small production company, a single mother who'd mastered social media marketing and quintupled her income as a freelancer, a veteran who'd struggled with PTSD and found purpose teaching cybersecurity fundamentals. The key is treating people as assets, not problems, Elena continued. Everyone who comes here has talents and experience. Our job is helping them translate those into market opportunities. Marcus found himself leaning forward, genuinely interested. What's your success rate? 87% of our students are employed or self-employed within 6 months of completing their programs. Average income increase is 240%. But those numbers only tell part of the story. Elena pulled up a video on her tablet. This is Maria. She came to us after her husband left, and she realized she had no job skills that could support her 3 kids. Watch. The video showed a confident woman presenting a business plan to a panel of judges. Maria explained her idea for a bilingual social media management service, demonstrating her understanding of market needs and growth strategies. Her presentation was professional and compelling. Maria won second place in the city's small business competition last month. The prize money helped her rent office space. She now has 4 employees and a waiting list of clients. Marcus watched Maria's transformation play out on the screen. The confidence in her voice, the sophisticated business thinking, the obvious pride in her accomplishment. This wasn't charity. This was human potential being unlocked through strategic support. How long had Maria been out of the workforce? 15 years. But she'd managed a household budget, coordinated family schedules, negotiated with schools and healthcare providers, resolved conflicts between siblings. All of those are transferable business skills. We just helped her see that and learn how to market those abilities. For the first time in years, Marcus felt genuinely curious about something outside his own company. What would a partnership with TechFlow look like? Elena's eyes brightened. We'd love access to your expertise in software development and business systems. Many of our students are interested in tech careers, but we lack advanced instruction in programming and database management. We also need better systems for tracking student progress and measuring outcomes. She pulled up architectural drawings on her tablet. We're renovating the second floor to create an advanced technology center. The vision is a space where students can work on real client projects while building their skills. Kind of like a consulting firm, but focused on learning rather than profit. Marcus studied the plans. The proposed technology center looked impressive: professional workstations, collaborative spaces, presentation areas. What's your timeline? Construction starts next month, assuming we can secure the funding. We're about 60% of the way to our goal. And the shortfall? $120,000. We've applied for grants, but you know how that goes. Foundations want measurable outcomes, which is difficult when you're trying to fund something that doesn't exist yet. Marcus found himself doing calculations in his head. $120,000 was what TechFlow spent on office coffee in a year. For the Bridge Foundation, it represented the difference between dreams and reality. Elena continued describing potential partnership opportunities, but Marcus was studying her face as much as listening to her words. Unlike everyone else he'd met in the nonprofit world, Elena talked about her work without martyrdom or emotional manipulation. She was passionate, but practical, idealistic, but grounded. She reminded him of himself in the early days of TechFlow, when the company was just an idea and endless possibility. Would you like to tour the facility? Elena asked. They walked through classrooms where the energy was palpable. In one room, a group of middle-aged adults worked through Excel formulas with the intensity of medical students. Another room buzzed with discussion as teams developed marketing strategies for local businesses. The maker space hummed with activity: 3D printers creating prototypes, laser cutters working on custom designs, soldering stations where students built electronic projects. The maker space is where magic happens, Elena explained, stopping to watch a teenager program a robot. Hands-on creation builds confidence faster than any classroom lecture. Students see immediate results from their work. In the media production studio, a woman in her 60s was editing a promotional video while receiving feedback from a much younger student. Both were completely absorbed in their work, collaborating across generational lines with easy familiarity. That's Dorothy, Elena said quietly. She raised 5 kids as a single mother, then took care of her elderly parents for 10 years. She came to us last year thinking she was too old to learn anything new. Now she's our most creative video producer. Marcus watched Dorothy work, noting her focused concentration and the technical skill evident in her editing choices. She's self-taught. Partly. She has an artist's eye that can't be taught. We just provided the technical training and equipment. Dorothy sees stories everywhere. Her promotional videos for local businesses have tripled their response rates. They concluded the tour in Elena's office, a small space that managed to be both efficient and welcoming. The walls displayed student achievements, certificates, newspaper clippings, thank you letters, but also artwork created in their programs and photographs from community events. The Morrison Industries requirement is for 6 months of partnership, Marcus said. settling into a chair across from Elena's desk. What would success look like from your perspective? Elena considered the question carefully. Access to advanced technical training for our students. Mentorship opportunities with your staff. Maybe some real consulting projects that students could work on under supervision. Most importantly, we'd want to create something sustainable that continues beyond the 6-month requirement. And from TechFlow's perspective, you'd get to see your employees engage in meaningful community work. Research shows that corporate volunteer programs improve job satisfaction and team cohesion. Plus, you might discover some remarkable talent. Several of our graduates would be excellent entry-level employees for a company like yours. Marcus found himself intrigued by the practical benefits Elena outlined. Most corporate social responsibility programs were expensive ways to feel good about success. Elena was describing something that could actually strengthen his company while helping people. What's your background? Marcus asked. This doesn't seem like typical nonprofit leadership. Elena laughed. Because it's not. I have an MBA from Stanford and spent 5 years in management consulting. I was making excellent money helping corporations optimize their operations while feeling completely empty inside. What changed? My brother was injured in Afghanistan and struggled to find work when he came home. He's brilliant, but traditional job training programs treated him like damaged goods instead of a valuable asset. I started volunteering to help veterans with resume writing and interview skills, which led to broader questions about why our economy wastes so much human potential. Elena's story was told without self-congratulation or dramatic emphasis. She'd identified a problem and developed a solution, the same way Marcus approached business challenges. The consulting background shows, Marcus observed. Thanks. I think the nonprofit world can be frustratingly inefficient sometimes. Good intentions don't automatically create good outcomes. I wanted to build something that combines social mission with business discipline. Marcus found himself genuinely curious about Elena's perspective on problems he'd never considered. What's the biggest challenge? Changing mindsets. Society treats poverty and unemployment like character flaws instead of systemic problems. People assume that anyone struggling must be lazy or incompetent. But I see incredibly talented, motivated people every day who just need access to opportunity. And the business community? Some companies genuinely want to help, but they don't know how. Others just want tax deductions and good publicity. The rare ones understand that investing in human potential creates long-term economic value for everyone. Marcus checked his watch, surprised to discover they'd been talking for over 2 hours. He couldn't remember the last time a meeting had held his attention so completely. I should let you get back to your students, he said, standing. Elena walked him to the entrance, past classrooms still buzzing with activity. Thank you for taking the time to really learn about what we do. Whether or not TechFlow decides to partner with us, I appreciate your genuine interest. I'll be in touch soon, Marcus replied, meaning it. Driving back to his office, Marcus found Marcus spent the next 3 days trying to forget about Elena Rodriguez and failing completely. Every meeting felt mechanical compared to their conversation. Every business decision seemed small against the backdrop of the transformation he'd witnessed at the Bridge Foundation. He found himself checking their website repeatedly, reading student success stories, and watching project videos with an attention he usually reserved for market analysis. On Friday morning, he made a decision that surprised himself. Instead of sending Jennifer to handle the partnership details, Marcus drove back to the Bridge Foundation personally. He told himself it was due diligence for a significant business partnership, but the truth was simpler. He wanted to see Elena again. The building buzzed with different energy than his first visit. It was graduation day for one of their programs, and families filled the lobby, chatting excitedly while students in business attire prepared for presentations. Marcus recognized several faces from his tour, including Maria, the woman who'd won the business competition. Mr. Chun. Elena appeared at his elbow, looking harried but happy. I wasn't expecting you today. This is perfect timing, though. Would you like to stay for the presentations? You could see exactly what our partnership training produces. Marcus had planned a quick business meeting, but Elena's enthusiasm was infectious. I'd like that. She led him to the main conference room where 24 students sat in neat rows, family members and supporters filling chairs along the walls. The nervous excitement was palpable. parents adjusting cameras, students reviewing note cards, younger siblings fidgeting in their seats. Ladies and gentlemen, Elena addressed the crowd. Welcome to the Bridge Foundation's quarterly presentation day. Today, our business development students will present the companies they've created over the past 12 weeks. Marcus settled into a back row seat, expecting amateur hour presentations that would be charming in their earnestness but lacking in substance. The first student proved him wrong immediately. James, a former warehouse worker in his 50s, presented a logistics consulting firm that specialized in helping small businesses optimize their supply chains. His PowerPoint was professional, his market analysis was thorough, and his financial projections were both ambitious and realistic. James fielded questions from the audience with confidence, demonstrating deep understanding of his industry and customer needs. I spent 20 years moving boxes, James concluded, but I was really learning how goods flow through the economy. Now I help small businesses move their products more efficiently, which saves them money and helps them grow. The second presenter, a young single mother named Keisha, had developed a mobile app that connected parents with trusted babysitters in their neighborhoods. She demonstrated the app's features, explained her user acquisition strategy, and outlined plans for expansion to 3 additional cities. Her presentation included customer testimonials, revenue projections, and a sophisticated understanding of the competitive landscape. Marcus found himself leaning forward, genuinely impressed. These weren't feel-good hobby projects. These were legitimate businesses with real potential for growth and profitability. The presentations continued. A veteran who'd created a home security consulting service, an older woman who'd launched a financial literacy coaching practice, a former gang member who'd built a youth mentorship program that generated revenue through corporate training contracts. During the break between presentations, Elena sat beside him. "What do you think so far?" "These are real businesses," Marcus said, unable to hide his surprise. "I was expecting, I don't know, something more basic." Elena smiled. "You were expecting charity cases presenting crafts projects?" "Something like that, yes. That's exactly the mindset we're trying to change. The people in this room have always had business instincts and problem-solving skills. They just needed access to training, resources, and someone who believed in their potential." Marcus watched James explaining his logistics software to a group of family members, his confidence growing with each question. "How many of these businesses actually succeed long-term?" "About 70% are still operating and profitable after 2 years. That's actually higher than the survival rate for traditionally funded startups. I think it's because our students have experienced real struggle. They don't take success for granted." The afternoon presentations were equally impressive. Marcus found himself taking notes, not out of polite interest, but genuine business curiosity. Several of the ventures represented market opportunities he'd never considered. The home security consultant was addressing a genuine need in an underserved market. The financial literacy coach had identified a business model that could scale nationally. As the formal presentations concluded, families gathered around students for congratulations and photographs. Marcus watched Elena move through the crowd, hugging students, talking with parents, celebrating each person's achievement with genuine joy. She remembered details about everyone, asking about someone's daughter's college application, inquiring about another student's mother's health, congratulating a proud father whose son had just graduated from high school. "Elena knows everyone's whole story," said Dorothy, the video producer Marcus had met during his tour. "She doesn't just teach business skills. She helps people remember what they're capable of." Marcus turned to find Dorothy beside him, video camera in hand, as she documented the celebration. "How long have you known her?" 2 years next month. "Best decision I ever made, walking into this place. I was living in my car when I started here, convinced I was too old and too broke to change anything about my life." Looking at Dorothy now, confident, skilled, obviously prosperous, Marcus found that hard to believe. "What changed?" "Elena saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. She didn't treat me like a charity case or a lost cause. She treated me like someone with valuable experience who just needed new tools to apply it." Marcus watched Elena across the room, photographing students with their families, her face bright with shared happiness. "She's remarkable." "That's the wrong word," Dorothy said thoughtfully. "Elena isn't remarkable because she's special. She's remarkable because she makes everyone around her feel special. There's a difference. As families began to leave, Marcus helped Elena and her staff clean up the conference room. It wasn't a conscious decision. He simply found himself stacking chairs and collecting presentation materials alongside volunteers and students. You don't have to do that, Elena protested, but Marcus waved her off. I'm not above manual labor. I built tech flow in my garage. Really? I pictured you starting in some high-tech incubator with venture capital funding. Nope. My partner and I maxed out our credit cards and worked out of my garage for 8 months. We ate ramen noodles for dinner and celebrated our first paid client with $2 champagne from the corner store. Elena stopped stacking chairs to look at him. That must have been exciting. Scary, but exciting. It was the best time of my life, Marcus admitted, then immediately regretted the honesty. He didn't share personal reflections with people he barely knew. But Elena didn't push for details or make sympathetic noises. She simply nodded understanding and continued cleaning up. Her lack of reaction somehow made Marcus feel safer to continue. Starting a business from nothing teaches you what really matters. Every decision has immediate consequences. You can't waste time or money on things that don't directly contribute to success. Is that what you miss? The clarity of purpose. Marcus paused, surprised by the question. I hadn't thought about it that way, but yes. Everything mattered when we were starting out. Now, success creates its own complications. Elena carried a stack of chairs to the storage closet. Complications like making decisions based on what you should want instead of what you actually want. The accuracy of her observation was unsettling. Marcus had spent 3 years making choices designed to protect him from disappointment rather than choices that brought him satisfaction. The Morrison Industries partnership was a perfect example, a good business decision that felt completely empty. Something like that. They worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the conference room gradually returning to its normal configuration. Most of the volunteers had finished their tasks and left, leaving Elena and Marcus alone with the quiet satisfaction of shared work. Can I ask you something? Elena said as they folded the last table. Sure. What really brought you here? I mean, Morrison Industries requires community partnership, but you have a dozen options. Why the Bridge Foundation? Marcus considered deflecting with a business rationale, but Dorothy's words echoed in his mind. Elena made people feel safe to be honest. I read about you in the newspaper. The article said you don't give up on people, even when they've given up on themselves. I found that interesting. Interesting how I'd given up on people. I thought I had good reasons. Then I met you and watched your students, and I started wondering if my reasons were actually excuses. Elena leaned against the folded table, studying his face. What happened to make you give up on people? Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest that accompanied thoughts of Sarah and David. For 3 years, he'd avoided discussing the betrayal with anyone beyond the basic facts. But something about Elena's direct gaze and genuine curiosity made him want to try. My business partner and my fiancé were having an affair. I discovered them together 3 weeks before our wedding. I found out later it had been going on for almost a year. That's devastating. I'm sorry. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was realizing how naive I'd been. I trusted them completely, never suspected anything. It made me question my judgment about people in general. Elena was quiet for a moment, considering his words. That kind of betrayal would shake anyone's faith in relationships. But, can I ask you something that might sound harsh? Marcus braced himself. Go ahead. Do you think your business partner and your fiancé were representative of all people, or just representative of themselves? The question caught him off guard. What do you mean? I mean, did their choices prove that humans are fundamentally untrustworthy, or did they prove that those 2 specific humans made selfish decisions? Because there's a big difference. Marcus had never considered the distinction. Sarah and David's betrayal had felt like confirmation of his worst suspicions about human nature, but Elena's question suggested a different interpretation. I work with people every day who've been betrayed, abandoned, or abused, Elena continued. They have every reason to be cynical about human nature. But most of them still choose to trust again, to hope again, to invest in relationships again. Not because they're naive, but because they understand that closing yourself off from connection is a different kind of death. Aren't they just setting themselves up for more disappointment? Some of them, probably. But they're also setting themselves up for joy, partnership, love, shared purpose. The students you met today, almost all of them have experienced significant betrayal or abandonment. Yet they're willing to trust our program, trust their classmates, trust their own potential for change. That takes courage. Marcus felt something shifting in his chest, like ice beginning to crack under spring warmth. How do they do it? How do they risk trusting again? By starting small. By choosing people who've earned trust through consistent actions over time. By building relationships slowly and paying attention to patterns rather than promises. Elena gathered her purse and laptop bag, gesturing toward the exit. Want to grab coffee? I know a place that serves food too, in case you haven't eaten. Marcus realized he was hungry for the first time in hours. More than that, he wasn't ready for their conversation to end. I'd like that. They walked 6 blocks to a small cafe in a converted bookstore, settling at a corner table surrounded by floor-to-ceiling shelves. The space was cozy and warm, filled with the comfortable chatter of students studying and friends catching up over dinner. This is where I do my best thinking, Elena said, ordering a sandwich and soup. There's something about being surrounded by books and conversation that makes everything feel possible. Marcus ordered a burger and coffee, surprised to find himself actually looking forward to the meal. Food had become fuel for 3 years, consumed mechanically while working or in solitude at home. Sharing a meal with Elena felt different, social, purposeful, even enjoyable. Tell me about the early days of TechFlow, Elena said. What was it like building something from nothing? Marcus found himself describing the excitement and terror of those first months, the sleepless nights debugging code, the rush of landing their first major client, the absolute commitment required to transform an idea into a functioning business. He talked about the creative problem-solving, the sense of mission that drove 18-hour days, the partnership with David that had felt like having a brother in the trenches. You light up when you talk about those days, Elena observed. Even when you mention your former partner, there's joy in your voice. It was pure before it got complicated. We were building something meaningful, solving real problems for clients, creating jobs for people we hired. Success felt like a shared victory. What changed? Marcus considered the question. Scale, maybe. When TechFlow was small, every decision felt personal. As we grew, business became more abstract. Numbers on spreadsheets instead of people with names and stories. Success stopped feeling personal too. And then, the betrayal made it feel dangerous to let business be personal again. Exactly. Safer to keep everything professional, transactional. Contracts protect you better than trust. Elena sipped her soup thoughtfully. But contracts only protect you from certain kinds of harm. They can't protect you from loneliness, meaninglessness, or the slow death of caring about anything beyond profit. Her words hit like a physical blow, not because they were cruel, but because they were accurate. Marcus had spent 3 years protecting himself from betrayal while creating a different kind of suffering. The gradual erosion of purpose and connection that had left him successful but empty. How do you maintain optimism in your work? Marcus asked. Don't you see enough human failure and weakness to become cynical? I see human failure every day. I also see human resilience, creativity, and capacity for growth. The students you met today have all experienced significant setbacks, job loss, addiction, abuse, discrimination, health crises. But they chose to keep trying, keep learning, keep believing in their ability to create better lives. Elena pulled out her phone and showed Marcus a photo from the morning's presentations. That's James with his grandson. James was unemployed for 3 years before coming to us. His wife left him, he lost his house, his adult children stopped taking his calls because he'd become so bitter and angry. He had every reason to give up. What changed his mind? His grandson asked him why he was so sad all the time. James realized he had a choice. He could stay angry about what he'd lost, or he could work to build something new. It wasn't easy. He struggled with our coursework, questioned whether he was too old to learn new skills, wanted to quit a dozen times. Marcus studied the photo. James stood with his arm around a boy of maybe 10, both of them beaming at the camera. The pride and joy in James's face was unmistakable. But he didn't quit. No, he didn't quit. And Now he has a business that's growing every month. He's rebuilding relationships with his kids. And he's showing his grandson that it's never too late to change your life. Marcus felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Hope, maybe, or recognition. James's story resonated in ways that surprised him. The loss, the anger, the gradual isolation from people who cared about him. But also the possibility of change, the choice to try again despite past failures. They talked until the cafe began closing around them. Conversation ranging from business philosophy to childhood memories to dreams for the future. Elena shared stories from her consulting days, describing the empty feeling of optimizing processes for companies that treated employees like interchangeable parts. Marcus found himself talking about his family, his sister's concern, his mother's unsuccessful attempts to set him up on dates. They know you're unhappy, Elena said gently. They think I need a relationship to be happy. I think I need to not get hurt again. Those aren't mutually exclusive. You can be careful about relationships without avoiding them entirely. The key is learning to distinguish between reasonable caution and self-destructive isolation. As they walked back toward their cars, Marcus felt lighter than he had in months. Not fixed or healed. He wasn't naive enough to believe that one conversation could undo 3 years of emotional numbness. But Elena had awakened something that had been dormant for too long, a sense of possibility that extended beyond quarterly profits and market share. Thank you for today, he said as they reached Elena's car. For the presentations, the conversation, helping me see things differently. Thank you for really paying attention. Most people visit nonprofits like tourists. They look around, write a check, and leave feeling good about themselves. You actually engage with what we're doing. Marcus hesitated, then asked the question that had been building all evening. Would you like to have dinner tomorrow night? Somewhere that doesn't require cleaning up chairs afterward. Elena smiled, and Marcus realized he'd been holding his breath waiting for her answer. I'd like that very much. Driving home, Marcus felt like he was waking up from a long sleep. The city looked brighter. The music on his radio sounded better. Even the traffic seemed less irritating. For 3 years, he'd moved through life in emotional suspended animation, protecting himself from further hurt by avoiding any situation that required genuine feeling. But watching Elena's students present their businesses, seeing the transformation that was possible when people believed in each other's potential, Marcus realized that protection had become its own form of imprisonment. He'd chosen safety over growth, control over connection, isolation over the messy complexity of human relationships. Tomorrow night, he would have dinner with a woman who challenged every assumption he'd made about trust and vulnerability. He didn't know where that dinner might lead, but for the first time in years, the uncertainty felt exciting rather than threatening. The crack in his armor had become a door, and Marcus was finally ready to walk through it. ND racing in unfamiliar ways. The bridge foundation represented everything he'd become cynical about: idealism, trust in human nature, belief that people could change and grow. But Elena's approach was different. She wasn't asking him to believe in fairy tales. She was presenting evidence, demonstrating results, proving that investment in people could yield measurable returns. Back in his office, Marcus stared at his computer screen without really seeing the quarterly reports displayed there. Elena Rodriguez had accomplished something he'd thought impossible. She'd made him curious about something other than profit margins and market share. More unsettling, she'd made him question assumptions he'd held about human nature and business success. For 3 years, Marcus had operated on the principle that people were fundamentally unreliable. Sarah and David's betrayal had confirmed his suspicions that trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. But watching Elena's students, seeing their dedication and transformation, he felt those convictions wavering. Maybe the problem wasn't that people couldn't be trusted. Maybe the problem was that he'd stopped believing in the possibility of genuine connection and shared purpose. Maybe the walls he'd built to protect himself had also cut him off from experiences that could restore his faith in something beyond individual achievement. Marcus picked up his phone, then set it down again. He wanted to call Elena, but wasn't sure what he'd say. The smart business decision was obvious: write a check, fulfill the Morrison Industries requirement, and maintain professional distance. But something deeper was stirring, something that had been dormant for 3 years. The crack in his armor was widening, and, for the first time since the betrayal, Marcus wasn't sure he wanted to repair it. He woke at 5:30, as he had every day for 3 years, and began his routine. Shower, coffee, review of overnight emails. Then, the drive to an office where success felt as mechanical as the elevator that carried him to the top floor. But something had shifted during the night, though Marcus couldn't quite identify what. Perhaps it was his mother's words, or the article about Elena Rodriguez, or simply the accumulated weight of 3 years spent building walls instead of bridges. Whatever it was, he felt a tiny crack in the armor he'd built around his heart. Not enough to change anything, not yet. But enough to notice that the armor had become a prison, and that the very defenses that protected him from pain were also blocking out everything else. Joy, connection, purpose beyond profit margins. Marcus pushed the thought away as he entered his office building, greeting the security guard with his usual polite nod. There were contracts to review, meetings to attend, and a company to run. Feelings were luxury items he couldn't afford, distractions from the serious business of building wealth and maintaining control. But the crack remained, invisible but growing, like the first sign of spring in a long winter that had lasted far too long.